After decades of speculation, he is finally revealing the truth about a story to his fans today. He finally discusses the tumultuous relationship, more of a rivalry than friendly competition, between the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. Enthusiasm belied resentment, power struggles, and long-simmering animosities that molded rock and roll's past. During the Cultural Revolution of the 1960s, British rock bands like the Rolling Stones and the Beatles were at the forefront. In the eyes of the general public, these two groups were inseparable, constantly inspiring one another to new levels of musical achievement. Despite appearances to the contrary, the rivalry was hostile behind the scenes. The Beatles were trailblazers. With each album, they redefined music and established new trends. The Rolling Stones were perpetually playing catch-up because they wanted the same amount of influence. They disagreed on more than just music. The Rolling Stones played up their image as renegade outsiders, in contrast to the Beatles' image as refined and cultured. The defiance, however, frequently seemed orchestrated, a backlash against the Beatles' supremacy. In response to every move the Beatles made, the Rolling Stones would inevitably chime in with an imitative sound, a comparable idea, or an exhausting effort to stay up. Many people thought the Rolling Stones' reaction to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band becoming famous was an uninspired cover of their Satanic Majesty's request. It was a competition between the two bands, with each group fighting for the chance to be named Britain's best rock act and for success in the studio and on the charts. Keith Richards, the unstoppable force behind the Rolling Stones, was a genius and a liability due to his talent and unpredictable nature. Although he was the band's rock, his erratic behavior frequently caused friction. He and Mick Jagger were always at odds with one another. The band's creative spark and potential demise were both driven by their tension, which served as its yin and yang. Compromise was never an option for Richards. He and Jagger had many heated disagreements about songwriting and stage presence because of his obstinacy, which clashed with Jagger's vision for the band. Ever the showman, Jagger aspired to be in charge. Richards fought back with equal tenacity. They fought over more than simply differences of opinion. It was a battle of enormous egos, as each man wanted to mold the Stones to his own liking. However, Jagger was not the last straw in the argument. Because of his rude and confrontational nature, Richard frequently clashed with his fellow band members. As Richards and Jagger became more controlling of the band's direction, the original leader of the Stones, Brian Jones, became more and more marginalized. Jones was ousted as a result of their increasing dominance, which many perceived as the start of the guitarist's demise. His untimely death and subsequent departure from the band in 1969 left an indelible mark on the Rolling Stones. Unlike some other bands, the Rolling Stones did not keep their feuds within the band. Their feuds went well beyond their immediate musical circle and spread throughout the industry with an intensity that frequently verged on antagonism. Among the most notorious feuds was with The Who, a band that embodied the opposite of the Rolling Stones: grandiose, theatrical, and relentlessly ambitious, in which the Rolling Stones took great delight in their unfiltered, raucous intensity. The Who's explosive, gigantic live performances were replete with intricate stories and thunderous guitar solos. This competition was hardly subdued. As they competed for the honor of Britain's best rock act, the two bands traded insults in the press. The Rolling Stones sound was criticized by Pete Townsend of The Who as being too simplistic and repetitive, and by what he perceived as the band's obsession with image rather than innovation. The Rolling Stones, for their part, thought The Who were full of themselves with their operatic ambitions and branded their music as ostentatious and overdone. As each band claimed dominion over British rock, the verbal sparring escalated into a public ideological war. But that wasn't the last point of contention. From feuds with the Kinks and The Who to direct confrontations with the Beatles, the Rolling Stones appeared to relish in the drama. There was a profound personal element to these rivalries. They weren't merely professional, fueling the ongoing comparisons that plagued the Rolling Stones' career. The Beatles were revered for their groundbreaking innovations, which transformed music with each album. Despite the Rolling Stones' indisputable talent, the public often viewed them as the defiant younger sibling who couldn't keep up with the rest of the pack, while The Who were lauded for their risky experimentation and dramatic spectacle. Simmering insecurity, especially on Keith Richards' part, was central to these disputes. Despite his outwardly detached demeanor, he was very sensitive to comparisons when he harshly criticized other bands. Richards called The Who's Tommy bloated nonsense and panned Abbey Road by the Beatles, as studio gimmicky. Although he would never publicly acknowledge it, Cry's scathing and unforgiving sarcasm concealed the fact that the Stones, rather than viewing these confrontations as mere contests, the Rolling Stones saw them as a struggle for significance amidst a scene dominated by behemoths. The shadow cast by their contemporaries was a reaction to every criticism and dismissive comment. The Stones' animosity toward one another served as motivation to hone their skills, test new limits, and carve out a niche for themselves in the cutthroat, chaotic rock and roll industry. Both the internal and external conflicts reflected in these, highlighting the duality that made the Rolling Stones what they were, a band that thrived on tension but was frequently consumed by it. Underneath every biting comment and rebellious posture was a sense of desperation, a constant reminder that even legendary figures suffer from the dread of failure. Their story was just as interesting as their music because the Stones' conflicts with the outside world showed both their ambition and their insecurities. The Rolling Stones paid a price for their image of defiance. The lengthy shadow that Keith Richards' well-documented struggles with addiction cast over the band was heavy. The Stones were perpetually troubled by his drug use, which was more than just an internal struggle for him. His unpredictable behavior caused tour schedules to be thrown off, studio sessions to be postponed, and relationships to become strained. The band was immersed in Richards' anarchy, which was both draining and inspiring because it wasn't contained within his own life. The unadulterated vitality that was the Stones' strongest suit was also their biggest vulnerability. Richard personified this duality. He was an exceptionally talented performer, but the mayhem he wreaked offstage more than made up for it. Though indelible in rock and roll annals, the Rolling Stones' tale is anything but tranquil. Their genius, which astonished countless, was shaped by the turmoil that engulfed them. Along with every revolutionary album and electrifying live performance, there was a trail of controversy that the band, their detractors, and even their devoted fans had to endure. Their ascent to immortality was both fascinating and terrifying because their journey was a study in paradoxes, a blend of togetherness and discord, success and defeat. Paul McCartney paints a picture of the Rolling Stones as a group whose disputes had a profound impact on them. Despite appearances, their animosity toward the Beatles was far more serious than it first appeared. It was more than simply music. It was a quest for self-discovery and acceptance in a society that seemed to prefer their more refined contemporaries. Despite the fact that the Stones' defiant persona frequently concealed underlying insecurity, they profited from it by portraying themselves as the counterpoint to the innovative Beatles. It wasn't enough for them to fight for a voice. They also wanted to be recognized as equals. Despite its extraordinary quality, their music was driven by the same intense tension that could have ended their lives. The brilliant songs written by the Rolling Stones came from a fiery combination of ambition and ego, and they were created in an environment of continual conflict. The foundation of their sound was Keith Richards' turbulent relationship with Mick Jagger. On the other hand, it caused unending strife. They demonstrated the precarious equilibrium that held the band together through their partnership, which was equal parts collaboration and rivalry. Resilience was central to the Rolling Stones' narrative and music. Their capacity to remain upright in the face of the mayhem they wreaked was put to the test with each confrontation and defeat. There were obvious fissures in their foundation that could have easily brought the whole building tumbling down. But they pulled through. What made them unique was their capacity to overcome their personal struggles. Their rebellion turned them into symbols of resilience and not only music. Ultimately, their impact extends far beyond the number of albums they sold or the number of concerts they headlined. It's about their insatiable desire for more, which drove them to keep going even when it drove a wedge between them. Their story serves as a sobering reminder that fame and fortune are fickle and that there is usually a price to pay for achieving greatness. Disagreement wasn't merely an element of the Rolling Stones' path, it was the very essence of their legendary status.